Penguin Random House Audio presents No Fault, a memoir of romance and divorce. This is the author, Haley Mlotek. For all my families. Part 1. I was married on a cold day in December. 13 months later, my husband moved out. We decided to separate in November after agreeing to spend the holidays with our families. We told just a few friends, thinking maybe this was temporary. But the weeks between were a problem. After over a decade celebrating the anniversary of the spring night he kissed me, a hotel elevator, a high school trip. Now there was the date that marked the night he kissed me in his mother's living room, where we exchanged rings and signed papers. We had been together for 13 years, lived together for 5, and now were we supposed to celebrate the 1 year we barely managed to stay married? Well, we made dinner reservations. Not knowing what to do or where to look, we talked about what we had done that day, our jobs. I tried to be careful, but couldn't help making some reference to our situation, so he would know the strangeness was not lost on me. What was your favorite part of being married? I asked, smiling to shield the was. He talked about our wedding, our move to a new city, and then he asked me the same question. Being a family, I said, and cried, but only a little. We flew home. We saw our families, and we fought. We were cat-sitting for a friend, and my husband spent his nights elsewhere. The cats had recently been kittens, and were not yet adjusted to their adult sizes. They ran and played as though they might not knock over water glasses or pull out electrical cords. They were cute, and they kept me awake all night. In the mornings, my handsome husband, I sometimes thought when I saw him, even after we decided to separate, because he was still both, would come home and feed them, and they would immediately fall asleep. God, I hated those cats. On the first day of the new year, we flew back to our apartment. By the third day, I was living there alone. Every generation of North American is now alive at a moment when they have access to what is usually called no-fault divorce, the legal dissolution of marriage that does not require a reason beyond choice. Those who have lived long enough to know the difference understand the significance of this freedom. Those who will never know the difference have inherited a profound question of what divorce should be, who it is for, and why the institution of marriage maintains its power. I have looked for guidance everywhere but real life, through fiction and film, through gossip and conversation, through research about the past and speculation about the future, and most of all through work. Always working, always writing. I have always preferred reading to reality. In reading, there's the possibility for more than just what's on the page, or the screen, or coming through the other end of the phone. In turning over what happened, the facts are just details, significance just interpretation. This is evasive and, better still, very effective. I want you to ask if I've read Anna Karenina. I do not want you to ask what I would do for love. There are some incidents that seem to matter most, and that becomes the story. Sometimes there's risk or danger, tears or blood. A story about broken plates, the screen in the window, the sound of his voice. But what happened after? That is what I want to know. When they both decided they had had enough, I want to ask, and then what? Did they go to bed? And if so, did they sleep in the same bed? What was it like the next morning? Did they make coffee or say goodbye before leaving for work? I prefer to see myself as audience, watching as though it didn't happen to me. When remembering, I can see that in my story, the worst happened twice, maybe 3 times. Then it was over. I would like to observe my feelings more than feel them. This is, I know, the bad kind of romance, believing there's meaning to be found if you could get the details right. Only some details matter, but I hold them all with the same weight. Every marriage requires that a couple agree on at least one part of the story, the ending. I once watched as a person trying to explain something took her pen to paper. Here was a circle, she said, and this was the way most people experienced their memories, as events linked in one round dance with each other, the lines between the beginning of their consciousness and a space stretching out in front yet to be lived. But then there was the way it happened and the way it was remembered, as a spiral that started low, grew wide, and lapped around and around, touching occasionally, as we perhaps regressed or lagged, or repeated a bad habit, or spent time in a stage we thought was over. That's the way I find myself trying to describe these years, not backward and forward, or up and down, but around and around and around and around. I, like so many, first inherited my knowledge of divorce from my family. Then came my own divorce. On the last day my husband and I lived together, I gave him my largest suitcase, the one I had used often during the 1 year we were married, traveling for work away from our home, and almost never in the 12 years of our relationship that preceded it, and watched the beginning of him packing. I left before he finished. It took 1 more year after that day before I told most of my friends and family and loved ones. In that year, my life changed so much I couldn't recognize it as my own, while many more days revealed only what I should have already known. Maybe I was waiting until I could tell the difference. Maybe I was waiting until I felt ready. Mostly, I was just waiting. The story my mother tells is, when I was 10, I told her she should leave my father. It's okay, I reassured her. We'll be fine. I have no memory of this, although I've heard it enough I can access an approximation. It does sound like one of the deliberately precocious things I said to keep an adult's attention. I remember my bedroom at the time, with the floral comforter and the shelf above my bed where I kept a lamp on all night, every night. In my memory, I am more preoccupied with the dark than I am with divorce. Across the hall was my younger sister Erin, in a room I remember being almost the mirror reflection of mine. The same arrangement of furniture, only oriented toward a window that faced the back rather than the front yard. And down the hall, in the tiny space attached by French doors to my parents' room, was the room they had turned into my baby sister Jackie's nursery. There are many moments from my childhood I don't remember. I have a better recollection of the homes we lived in, the moves and mortgages that took us to new neighborhoods every few years. The smell that evokes home is, for me, fresh paint. With each bedroom, I would try to recreate the same collages on new walls, photos from caboodles or Candy's ads, images of Sarah Michelle Gellar and Aaliyah, torn from stolen issues of Teen People and Cosmo Girl, the elastic pull of bright blue sticky tat close to ripping the thin pages with their coated gloss. I know I always kept my bedroom lamp on. I have always been afraid of the dark, and I always wanted my parents to get a divorce. The other details, what does it matter? I was, the story proves, a child of divorce long before the day my father knocked on my bedroom door 9 years later to say he was leaving. In those years, my father was an insomniac. Nobody seemed to sleep in our house, and if they did, they didn't sleep well. I would spend my nights looking up the real story of Anastasia and the Romanovs, or scrolling through the Delia's catalog, or having cyber sets and chat rooms. My parents fought often, their volume reaching decibels I felt through my bedroom door and into my rib cage. The fight was always over money, how much we had, which was not enough for what we needed. The light I kept on in my bedroom was always accompanied by the blue light of the television set my father watched late into the night. Sometimes my father spoke to himself. This was one of his classic traits. We all teased him about it, which he took very good-naturedly. He spoke to himself while he watched television and while he drove, though it wasn't the same as when he spoke out loud. His voice was audible, but it was like you were eavesdropping on the sound between a thought and a whisper. He didn't seem to realize it as it was happening. Sometimes he would slap the steering wheel or the sofa arm for effect when he got too carried away, and I would flinch, and then he would stop. He was, I think, practicing or preparing for some future conversation. My thoughts are also always in the shape of a conversation, or sometimes perhaps a fight.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?